Hey everyone, this is Kevin from thechesswebsite.com, and today we're going to be going over the bird's opening, which starts out pawn to f4. Now, the bird's opening is not one of the most popular moves compared to, the king pawn or the queen pawn opening, but I feel that this can be to your benefit, as most players aren't too familiar playing it correctly as white or defending it correctly as black. So I wanted to take some time to make a video on some of the common themes that you'll see in the bird opening if you ever come across it, or if you decide to play it yourself and want to really study up on an opening that a lot of other players may not know very well. So we'll go ahead and get into it. First move is f4. Now black has a lot of different options. We'll go over a few and then we'll kind of go over the main line. Obviously sometimes you'll see a move like e5, which is the Fromm's gambit. From here, you can kind of choose if you want to go ahead and capture this piece, or you can just transition straight into the king's gambit. So if you're familiar with the king's gambit, you can go ahead and play that line. If someone's never played against the bird's opening, they're usually not going to offer up this gambit, but just to keep that in mind. The main line, though, and the moves may vary very slightly here and there, but the main line starts off with knight to f6, and then white's going to develop his knight to f3, and white has the idea of controlling the dark squares. A lot of times with white usually tries to control the light squares. A lot of times you'll see from the very beginning that the light square bishop for white is very powerful, and white usually tries to control the light squares. Where in this case, as you'll see, white's going to try to control the dark squares, which is a little bit different. So in this case, our dark square bishop, most of the time in the main line, we're going to fianchetto our bishop to the b2 square, and our dark square bishop is going to be very valuable to us. So as you can see right away, we have two attackers on this e5 square, and we have our knight attacking this d4 square. So we're attacking and defending the dark squares. So from here, and again the move order can change just a little bit, the main line is for black to continue to d5, and you may see the knight and the pawn move reversed, but either way, this is the main line. You can see here that black is trying to attack now the light squares, and so you're going to have this tension and battle throughout the game in a bird's opening of one side trying to control one color and one side trying to control the other, and then one side's going to have to eventually just give. And so we're going to talk about how to build up your attack and how to make sure that you are on the winning side of that. So from here, white normally continues with e3, and this does a couple things. One, it opens up the door for our bishop to get out. I prefer moving our bishop out this way. Some people in the bird's opening will fianchetto their bishop to the g2 square. It's a little harder to keep your king in safety, so I like this e3 move. And it also builds along these dark squares too. As you can see, we now have two attackers and defenders on the d4 square and two attackers and defenders on the e5 square. From here, a lot of times you'll see black develop to c5, and then white has two different options here. The more common move is just to bring the bishop to e2, getting ready to castle kingside with white, and also developing and defending this knight here in case black wants to bring down this bishop. The knight will no longer be pinned to the queen. Another thing, it all depends on the player. A lot of times people will bring their bishop to b5 and check black, and a lot of times in a bird's opening, white likes to trade off his light square bishop. So let's say black were to play bishop to d7. Since the dark squares are the main priority for white in this game, his light square bishop is not as valuable, so a lot of times he'll just go ahead and trade off his light square bishop, knowing that he's going to fianchetto his dark bishop, and that's going to be on a long diagonal attacking the dark squares. So I personally don't like to give up my bishops early on in a game, but You know, if you play the bird's opening a lot and you feel like your light square bishop isn't getting a lot of play, then you may want to go ahead and exchange pieces early on, and that way you don't have to worry about it. It's all about feel and what you feel most comfortable with, but the most common play is just bishop to e2 here. And then from here, you'll normally see black develop his knight to c6. And then from here, you obviously want to castle just for king protection. For white, the f2 square is a very big weakness at the beginning, as is the f7 square for black. And since our pawn is not here, our king is pretty vulnerable, so we want to go ahead and put him in a safer place. From here, you'll normally see black strengthen his pawn chain, and also allow his bishop to develop so that he can castle kingside as well and get his king to safety. From here, you normally see white start to fianchetto his bishop, so pawn to b3, and then from here, black's just going to develop his bishop, and then white's going to fianchetto his bishop to b2. And as you can see, white has the idea of putting a lot of pressure on these dark squares in the middle. Each of these squares has 3 defenders and attackers on it, so white's trying to do everything it can to control the center of the board here on the dark squares. And this e3 pawn, a lot of times people will make a mistake and just immediately push up their d pawn to d4. That's going to be a mistake. Your e3 pawn is a big weakness, and at the time being, you want to kind of hold back this d2 pawn. If, for instance, black were to try to bring his pawn to d4, if he were to capture, you know, from here, white has the option of just bringing this piece up, kind of waiting to see where this d pawn wants to go, and then if black does decide to capture, then white can recapture here. But you don't want to immediately move this piece up. Let's say we were just to move this piece up here, and then when they capture, then you recapture, and then you kind of have this f pawn hanging there, and then you have kind of a weakness here. So just a few tidbits to kind of look at when you are playing the game. We'll go back to this position here with the bishop on b2, and then from here you'll just normally see black castle kingside. So from here, both sides are going to have, you know, a great game. Obviously, black's trying to control the light squares here, and white's trying to control the dark squares here. So these are some of the common things you want to look for in the game. If you see something, you know, fishy, that you're like, hey, wait a minute, just go ahead and take and analyze the position, see what the other side's trying to do, and play from there. The bird's opening is not very common, so you're probably going to see some pretty uncommon moves. So just play around with it and try to get better. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next video. Thanks for watching.